A bit about GPS and Polo, not just what we've done last season, because you've already heard all that from Regan, but where we see this going, how we see this growing. They're really powerful devices. They don't just measure speed and distance, but we can look at some other interesting things too. So you've already seen this picture, down the belt, up at the top. What we're hoping to do in the future is really use 2 units together, or maybe 3 units together. We can time sync them, and we can look at what's happening in your swing using these GPS units. So looking at things like rotation, looking at how far and how fast you travel over the course of your swing. And we're hoping that might provide some sort of coaching element and the use of technology in coaching, which is something Regan's pretty passionate about. This is what a game of polo currently looks like on the GPS units. When we download that data, we see it looks very similar to other team sports. And that's great for us because we're sports scientists and we can talk about team sports, sort of what we're trained to do. I'm not going to tell you whose data this is, but it is the fastest reading that we've achieved. So if those of you in the room who know whose data it is, give them a nod. And it's this point up here, so 61.6 k's an hour, and another person in the room second at 61.5. So we're all over the show, and that's great to see. We can relate to this, but it's not really telling you much as players. We can't really see where chukkers are, we can't see where people are changing horses. So what we tried to do last season was work on just a more personal report that maybe meant a bit more to you. So looking at something like this. This was how I spent most of my nights during the Open, up till 1 o'clock most mornings, trying to turn this round for people, trying to figure out what they did that day. I don't know how proud I am of that. I know it was pretty tough on my marriage at the time. But what we see here is each chukker, how fast people were going, and sort of the distribution of those speeds. And we can add sort of per pony statistics in as well. And we think this is really important over a tournament to see just how that workload's adding up per pony. We also get into things like impact and where you achieved that top speed, which distance was the greatest and in which chukker. And that's what we sort of like to give to players now. So a bit more direct feedback and something that you can work with, hopefully. It's great to see that GPS is being used by Polo elsewhere in the world. Kit very kindly sent this through to me. And this is over in Argentina. And we can see that we're starting to incorporate a tactical element to what we're doing now too. So looking at ball possession alongside things like distance covered. But really knowing how far your entire team goes doesn't tell you too much. Top speed is always nice. Kit's faster, which again is always good. And again, referring back to penalties. So really tying together all these studies that we've done thus far. What we want to do though is look at you on an individual level, and we can do this. So these are pretty much everyone's movements throughout a polo game. This is one player, and you can see we've got these little heat maps. So there was a lot going on down at this goal. There were obviously a lot of goals scored because we're up here on halfway, and then they were clearly changing horses down here too. So we can get a feel for how much of the pitch you use, how much of that distance you're covering at what speed. That's what all these different coloured lines show. And we can start to maybe make some tactical or coaching decisions alongside this too, or just use it as a training aid, you know, in chukkers, something like that. What did you do? Were you effective at doing it? And how did your horse feel whilst you were doing that? That was probably a lot quicker than what I intended it to be, because I too am hungry. What I'd like to do now is just invite JP and Nina to comment on each other's data a little bit. During the Open, I was firing their data through to them, and I found it really interesting that you two had different opinions on each other's data.
Well, I think it all comes down to what position you're playing in the team and what your role is. So we both do very different things. I'm normally further up the front scoring goals, and he's doing a lot of the hard work at the back. So it was interesting to see the difference and see what different pressures our horses were under and how we sort of covered the ground differently in the game.
Cool, thanks. Shall I pass over to you now? Yeah, all good. Right, Regan's going to talk to you about some heart rate things. And this loads.